farming and ranching are built on strength, pride, and resilience. But behind that strength are real people, facing isolation, stress, uncertainty, and sometimes overwhelming pressure.
Good evening and welcome to this special episode of Protect Her on mental health in agriculture. Protect Her focuses on ag safety, grain bins, ATVs and UTVs, and manure pits, because protecting ag families matter. But underlying all of that, we know one of the most critical components of safety, protecting mental health. And tonight we're dedicating an entire show to the mental health of farmers and ranchers, women and men, and to some of the people and organizations working every day to make sure no one in agriculture feels alone. While Mental Health Awareness Month happens every May, we know the importance of continuing the conversation throughout the year, not just one dedicated month. I'm excited to sit down with three amazing people today who are all connected to agriculture and all working to ensure the conversation does continue. So let's get started in our first segment with some real stories, real challenges, and real solutions as we get to know Jessica Cabrera and Jeff Winton. Jessica, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Jessica, let's start off with you. Tell our viewers and everybody at home that are tuning in a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. My name is Jessica Cabrera. I serve as the Managing Director of Member Engagement and Farm State of Mind at American Farm Bureau. American Farm Bureau is an agricultural, grassroots agriculture organization. We are a membership organization representing really nearly 5 million member households. We are serving as the voice of agriculture across the United States. And that's through almost 2,800 county farm bureaus, a farm bureau in every state and in Puerto Rico. And we listen to the voice of the farmers and do the work that needs to be done. So that's what we do here also through Farm State of Mind. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Hey, and you know here at RFD-TV, we love Voices for Agriculture, so we're grateful for everything you do. Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do as well.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Jeff Winton, and I'm actually here wearing two hats. So I am the owner of Wall Street Dairy, which is a family dairy farm on beautiful Lake Erie in upstate New York. But I'm also the chairman and the founder of Rural Minds. And Rural Minds is a relatively young organization founded nearly 5 years ago as a result of a tragedy that happened in my farming family. And we advocate for the 46 million people who live in rural America and focus specifically and exclusively on mental health equity for 14% of the population.
Yeah, it changes things, obviously, when things hit close to home, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. I would like both of you to answer this question. And when people talk about agriculture, they think of farmers and ranchers, they think of grit, they think of toughness, they think of resilience, they think of all those things. But what do you both see when you talk to folks in the community, in the ag community, obviously more specifically, every day? Jessica, I'll start with you.
Honestly, when I'm with farmers, especially when I'm on farm and I'm looking at the way that they live their life, what I see more than anything is sacrifice. I see that there's a commitment to something that's much bigger than themselves. And that is something when I talk to farmers and they're telling me about what they do, all of the grit, all of the grind, it's because they're laying themselves on the line for something that's just much bigger than themselves. It's their faith, it's their family, it's the land, it's their legacy, those kinds of things.
I come from a farming and ranching family. I don't know if I shared that with the both of you yet, but I understand that more than ever because you see the sacrifices that these families make day in and day out, not only for their families, but the families across America and the globe. Jeff, if you don't mind answering that question as well, because you talked to, and again, like it's hit close to home for you.
Certainly. Well, one of the words you used when asking the question, resilience, I think is so critically important right now for all of us to remember, because it's a very difficult time in agriculture right now for many, many reasons. But farmers are resilient. Farmers are in this for the long run. And despite the fact that we're going through a difficult time right now, we will get to the other side. as hopeless as it may seem at certain times. And I see this on my own farm. You know, we're struggling right now with the whole fertilizer question, but yet we're making some alternative plans so that we'll have ample crops this year and beyond. So I think agility is another piece of this, that we learn to be very agile and we learn how to do things quickly and make mid-course corrections much faster than perhaps other professions do.
Yeah, agility, I love that word. And I think, again, we could get into all the different things that we're struggling with as farmers and ranchers, obviously fuel, you name it, but it all then directly ties back to mental health. And Jeff, Rural Minds exists because there was a gap, a real need. Yeah. And you knew that. I know you experienced loss like we talked about directly. Was there a specific moment after that loss that made you realize mental health needs to be discussed? It can't be this side conversation anymore. What was that moment like, and when did you take that first step forward to make the change?
Well, this is actually a result of my mother's love for her grandson.
A female, we love her.
There you go. And she was very involved in our family farm, but the true matriarch of our family. And my 28-year-old nephew, Brooks, died by suicide 2 days after his brother's wedding, leaving behind 3-year-old twins in a small farming town near where our farm is. And at that point, we had people in the community that didn't necessarily think we should talk about the fact that my 28-year-old nephew died by suicide. And my mother, with tears streaming down her face in the pastor's study, said, "Pastor, this is going to stop with my family. This has been going on in this community way too long. We're not only going to talk about why Brooks died, but we're going to start at his funeral," which we did 2 days later. And that's what really planted the seed for Rural Minds, because after my nephew's funeral was over, we had other farm families lined up for hours to tell us stories that they had never told anyone else. But because of my mother's courage and her tenacity, it gave other farm families permission to finally start talking about what had been happening in this farming community.
Sometimes we always talk about opening a door, right? Like, oh, or open the window, or, you know, go through. And oftentimes we actually need somebody else to maybe push that door open for us. Yeah. And that's also the hard thing. Again, we go back to the very beginning of starting this show this evening, and it's talking about, man, they're gritty people, they're out there, they're resilient, but they're also, this is a livelihood, it's a lifestyle, it's a business, and there's so much pressure that comes with that. I mean, Jessica with State Farm of Mind, AFBF, made a clear statement that mental health belongs in the ag conversation. What did you hear from farmers when that work first launched?
Yeah, you know, we actually started in the space of doing mental health awareness, and because we heard from farmers, believe it or not, even with all of the stigma, there were still farm families like Jeff's family saying, no, we're going to talk about this. And an organization like Farm Bureau that's representing the voice of those farmers, they're saying, what is Farm Bureau going to do about it? So we started really in that space. But I would say that additionally, once we started to put it on the agenda, right? Once we started to host workshops at conferences and at conventions, then suddenly we're not having very many people show up, right? I can remember when we had one workshop on a convention agenda and maybe 20 people come at a very big event. But let me tell you, it has changed. And it's changed because of exactly what he's talking about. We started to work, actually we started working in opioid misuse because that was so prevalent in rural communities. And then really building into asking questions, what is it that people need? And that's where we started to unfold more and more programming. Do you know that after starting that conversation, opening that door, like what you just said, now I can remember a leadership conference that we did just a couple of years ago, and there were 3 sessions on that agenda related to mental health, wellness, resilience. They were on the agenda because farmers said that they wanted them on the agenda, because farmers are planning the agenda. And then when we got to the event, every single one of them was packed out. So think about, they're showing up now. They're hearing that it's okay to talk about this conversation. They're hearing that it's okay to take care of yourself and to understand that your wellness is a part of your business. And I think that that's something that I've seen shift. But when we started, a lot of people wondered, why is Farm Bureau doing this? And now we can see that it definitely has a space whenever you're talking about representing the voice of agriculture.
Yeah, and I know we have a few more questions to get to, and I want to ask you, Jeff, about the stigma, but like one word we haven't mentioned is isolation. When you're in rural communities, whether you're on a large farm, large ranch, I travel to them all the time. Again, I grew up in it, and we all have some connection to some sort of mental illness that has like tied to somebody and something has happened. Isolation is a huge thing in rural areas, and we don't talk about that enough.
Right. And we have a huge issue in this country overall with loneliness.
Yes.
You know, the statistic I read recently is that 50% of Americans, regardless where they live, have said that they have felt extreme loneliness in the last year. And for those of us who live in rural America, especially on farms, it's a double-edged sword. We love the peaceful environment. We love the serenity. We love being around nature. But where my farm is, I look out the window, I can't see any neighbors. So if I wanted to walk next door and get a cup of coffee or, you know, have a conversation, I don't have anywhere necessarily that I can just walk to readily. And I think that's something that people are really struggling with now. And even though we're more connected than ever because of our devices and social media and things like that, the loneliness factor and the isolation seems to be growing and is much more exacerbated. And that's why these conversations are so incredibly important, because as Jessica said, we have to look at this as health overall.
Yeah.
Because all too often, mental illness is not considered an illness. We'll talk about cancer, we'll talk about heart disease, we talk about diabetes, but no one wants to talk about depression. No one wants to talk about schizophrenia or psychosis. And we have to start getting people comfortable having these open conversations, because that is what's going to tackle the stigma that we're facing.
Well, you mentioned two things there that I want to touch on. One, social media. That's a highlight reel. And I think sometimes people, obviously they feel connected, but it also then puts you in this space to feel like, wow, my life isn't measuring up to something, which leads to a mental kind of handicap in a way. And so it's not always the healthiest thing, right? The devices aren't always the healthiest tool to have to feel connected. What are your thoughts on that? Because also I do think, though, in retrospect, though, the younger generations are talking. They want to communicate about their feelings, where the older generations, that was hard for them, you know? It's, I mean, I look at my older sister and how she parents versus how we were parented. And, you know, my parents were like, you're fine, go get it, you know? And she wants to parent that way. She's like, but, you know, we kind of got to get on the ground with the kids and be like, tell me how you feel right now. So things are changing, and it is for the better, because people are wanting to communicate. And you touched on the stigma right there. I mean, both of you obviously can answer this as well. So for anyone who's watching this and they might recognize themselves, they might recognize somebody in a position, a part of their family or friend. What would you tell them? Like, what would your advice be on how to navigate this?
Yeah, if they're struggling, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, frankly, my biggest advice is really related to what Jeff just said, and that is to reach out and to connect, even when you don't feel like it. Because when you are dealing with the pressure, the isolation, and depression, darkness looms, and it will not go away until you break it free. And so it can really eat you up. And because of the isolation and because of the fact that folks are often in rural communities are very isolated, and also because of this kind of grit and grind culture, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps culture, that is something that folks are going to need to learn and get comfortable with reaching out for help and saying, I need to talk right now because it's just too much. And that's a starting point. It's a step.
Yeah, we still have some time, obviously, in this segment, and this is just such a heavy conversation, right? And it's a hard one for probably people to hear, to watch, to listen to. What are your thoughts on that? Because again, we're all trying to transition and change our mindsets of like, hey, this conversation needs to happen. It's happening regardless if we're a part of it or not.
Right. Well, the fact remains there are plenty of resources that even in a rural area where we don't have the same type of resources that we would have in an urban or suburban area, they do exist, but it has to start with you. You have to admit that something isn't right. And then, as Jessica said, reach out to one person. All it takes is one person. Someone that you trust who can then help you find those resources. And that's where, you know, to the discussion we just had a few minutes ago, social media and the internet play such a key role, because if you don't have resources readily available in your community, chances are they're on websites, whether it's ours at ruralminds.org. I know the Farm Bureau has a very robust website. And we've got to remember the 988 number, which is the number that you can call or text 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and you will be connected with a live trained mental health provider who will stay on the phone with you as long as it takes to get you through your time of trouble. And then they'll help you the next day. Get connected with resources in your community. So 988 is such an incredible resource that is accessible to all of us, regardless where we live.
Yeah, sometimes we just need people to listen, right? And that gets us through. The only way out is through, right?
Yeah.
And so, Jessica, you explained, obviously, farm states, you know, of mind resources, the engagement, peer connection, education, all of that. I don't know if there's any more you want to touch on that, because I also know that we have a great video that we want to show. But if there's anything else you want to tell the viewers about that, we'd love to hear.
Definitely. What I really want all the viewers to know is that through Farm State of Mind, you can join TogetherAll. This is made possible by an alliance of partners who have come together to make this possible. When you go to farmstateofmind.org, you'll see a Learn More button for TogetherAll. And by joining TogetherAll, you have an access to a suite of resources at no cost to you. And the reason I really want people to understand this is because now, through this resource, you have access to free counseling services through the TogetherAll platform. So please know, farm families nationwide have access to free counseling and consultation services through farmstateofmind.org, and I don't want anyone to go without help. So please check it out.
Yeah, dollar signs can be very intimidating, especially in today's economy. But as you said, free. You said that word, it's free.
It's free.
The help, the resources, it's there, and you guys are providing that, both of you. I know we have a video to look at, so let's just take a look at that now.
I realized it really wasn't even about the sheep or the barn. It was about other stuff that had happened, and there's resources that Farm Bureau has pushed out to people, and being an advocate for that, I try to tell people to log on to that and to log on to Farm State of Mind. You don't have that person to vent to. That TogetherAll platform gives you that opportunity to do that anonymously and have no regrets about it. If you feel like you need to talk to somebody, talk to somebody. Don't make a permanent situation out of something temporary. There's bad stuff that happens to everybody. Don't think it's just you. We all need a little bit of help.
A permanent situation out of something temporary. I know you said that before we came out here today. That's a big thing.
Yeah, don't make a permanent decision because of a temporary circumstance.
Yeah. Well, again, Jessica, I know we have more in the show to get to, but thank you so much for joining me up here. And again, I'll be talking to both of you again, and we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll have another special guest with us to continue this conversation. We'll be joined by Rupa Mehta, so stay with us. Welcome back to The Weight We Carry, where we are digging into the important topic of mental health in agriculture. I have Jeff Winton still here with us, but we're going to hear from Rupa Mehta in this segment as well. Rupa, welcome. Let's kick it off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, the organization, all the things that you do, and let's have our viewers get a chance to know you.
Oh, thank you. It is such an honor to be here with Jeff, Jessica, and you. My background is rooted in wellness. I ran a fitness studio in New York City for over 20 years called Nalini Method. It was named after my mom, who was just the healthiest person I ever met. She was awesome. And I paired intense physical workouts with bite-sized emotional workouts because I felt like that combination, moving the body, moving the mind, was very helpful. It gave birth to a national nonprofit that we run where we help children from preschool all the way to 12th grade tackle emotional and physical weight in their lives. And we do this through word movements. So think the gardening movement, the nervous workout, the happy workout, the safety workout. And as a result, children have a full body understanding of the words in their lives that weigh them down and lift them up, like the weight we carry. So appropriate. And then alongside that, TV and kids content, my husband, his name is Sam Goldberg. I think you've met him before, but we produce and create farm-centric content. So in 2019, we produced a feature-length film called Silo, which I'm happy that mostly everyone here has watched and enjoyed. And then we just finished filming a 6-part limited TV series this past summer called Perfect Sundays. It's going to debut late this summer, and all our initiatives have a social impact component. And for this, we really want farmer health outcome to be better.
That's really important to you guys, Rupa, and I want to talk about that a little bit because you mentioned like from preschool up, obviously educating young minds at such a young age, like getting in like boots on the ground, right? Talk about that a little bit more and like why you work closely with families and youth, helping create a space for people to feel comfortable and to create these conversations and for it to come naturally. I mean, why is connection such a powerful tool, and why do you feel like it's so important to start at a young age?
Well, for me, connection comes in so many different shapes and forms. It could be a kind gesture, it could be a smile, someone knowing your name, all the way to being in an environment and a system that makes you feel welcome. And all along the journey of connecting in a simple way, it will lead you to wellness. To me, connection leads to care, and care leads to wellness. So I was reading this staggering statistic, at least in my opinion, that 50 years ago, an average American knew 80% of their neighbors' names, and now it's down to 25% or even less. And it's a simple name, but just knowing your neighbor's name could lead to them feeling like, oh, someone's aware of my existence, someone cares. And that could lead to them taking better care of themselves and wanting to contribute to the community. And so it's a cycle that all starts with a simple connection, even just knowing someone's name.
Yeah, I mean, and why do you think that is? Why do you think people aren't taking the time to get to know their neighbors anymore?
I mean, we're, like you were saying earlier, we're on our devices. It's very hard to pull us away. It's such addictive content. But if you take the time to look up on the elevator, I mean, I'm in New York City all the time, but I also now live in Pennsylvania. But just take the time to get to know the neighbor at the mailbox. I mean, we're living such separate lives, even though we're right next door to each other because of these devices.
Yeah, and I always like to go back to, I mentioned earlier, obviously, my sister and her parenting, and my younger sister actually just had twins as well, and so it'll be fun to watch how she parents. So she's brand new, so she's just fresh on it. But how I grew up watching my parents handle stress, right? Jeff, like I want you to talk about this because I think people reflect on that and they're like, oh man, how are my kids watching how we handle stress? Like in the tough times and the good times, what does that look like? Personally, professionally, all of that. How does that reality show up in rural families, especially with those working in agriculture, because it's directly affected your family and face the obstacles and challenges at a higher rate than anything else? I know when times are tough, right? I know when the almond prices are down, let me tell you. My conversations with my dad are a little bit different, but his positive outlook, because he's been through the storms. But it's different now for my brother-in-law, who's, you know, younger and newer in farming. But like, how do we handle that? How do we manage that? How do we reflect that to our younger families and the younger generations?
Well, you mentioned rural families in general, and We advocate for all rural Americans, 46 million people, as I said earlier. And so there are some very unique challenges to young people growing up on farms and in the agricultural community, but they're not unlike what we find in mining communities in Western Pennsylvania, what we find in the fishing industry, what we find in the timber industry. Rural America is much more diverse than farming, and obviously we're talking about farming today, but we have to understand that what is happening in this country goes across many different rurally based industries. Yeah. What gives me hope as I travel around the country doing the work that we do at Rural Minds is that young people are talking. Young people are getting their parents and their grandparents finally to start talking about what's happening, because we all know young people are much more likely to talk about a lot of topics than certainly my generation was willing to do. And that is what is going to start finally addressing the stigma we have. The young people are leading the older generations of the family and really making them feel more comfortable with what is happening. And the other piece of that that's so critically important is in the case of mental illness, there many times is a genetic predisposition. That mental illness, just like other physical illnesses, can and does run in families. Yeah. So it's important around the kitchen table or out in the barn or wherever the families are to have these very frank conversations so that the young generation, the next people to hopefully take over the farm, are vigilant and they understand that they may be at risk for this. And if you don't talk about it, they'll never understand that this isn't something that just happened. This is part of their DNA, and that's so critically important.
Yeah, we all forget we're doing life for the first time, right? My parents, this is their first time doing life. My grandparents, their first time being grandparents, you know, all the things. And so it's a very interesting, challenging thing to navigate, but we're all trying to navigate this. Everybody's busy looks different. Everybody's hard looks different. You mentioned Perfect Sundays, Rupa. I want you to go into that a little bit more, the driving force behind that, why you guys saw the need, and kind of what catapulted into like creating this.
Yes. Oh, I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest.
Why did we do this? You know, I'm still tired from it.
So as you know, I have a love for health and wellness, and I fell in love with agriculture and farming about a decade ago. My husband, who's a born and bred New Yorker, visited a farm in Kentucky, and the rest is history. We moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania 6 years ago to create this 6-part limited series. Building on our experience with Silo, we wanted to make sure that it was heavily researched, that it was authentic, and we really wanted to build it alongside our community. So I'm happy to say where we filmed was a 7th generation dairy farm 20 minutes away from our house. We really built this by farmers for farmers, and the idea was that narrative storytelling could play a critical role in this dialogue and this epidemic of mental health. That, you know, when you're listening to a story, you put some things kind of on hold and you immerse yourself in someone else's reality, and some of the darkness from within you can kind of come alive and you are more comfortable to talk about it. So we hope that this series is going to be healing for the farm community and actually a gateway for suburban communities and urban communities to get invested in farming. I mean, like I said, we're from New York. We moved to rural Pennsylvania, so now I'm a proud rural American and I'm a proud New Yorker. And I think that this 6-part mini-series, because it's so authentic and a true-to-life drama. Oh, I didn't tell you what it's about. Let me go ahead and tell you what it's about. So Perfect Sundays, it takes place on a dairy farm, and we meet the family, in this instance, the Weeks family, and we go through their day-to-day struggles, their financial and emotional struggles, and they're grappling with the suicide of their patriarch. And so we meet there 2 years to the day that it happened and how they're handling it as a family. And I think it's going to awaken a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. I want to touch on something because you said 7th generation.
Yes.
I think that's a heavy thing, that generational, carrying on anything, and any kind of occupancy. Like, it doesn't matter if you're in farming or ranching, it could be in a lot of things. Yep. That is a heavy word nowadays because people feel, and it could have been heavy back then, but we weren't talking as much about that, right? Yep. But people feel the weight to continue that. Yep. and this leads into mental health and everything. I mean, talk about that.
Yeah, this is part of our identity as farmers. This is more than just a job. This is our brand. This is our reason for being. And as the oldest son in my generation on the farm, who decided that I wanted to have another career in addition to farming, it was very heavy for me because I had to make a decision because it was expected that someone in my family would carry on the farm. Now, fortunately, 2 of my brothers decided they would, so I could go off and have another career, and now I'm back on the farm. But I know that what I struggled with, just myself as a young person, thinking I have these dreams, I have these aspirations, I really want to do something else, but I also don't want this multi-generational farm to turn into a housing development or a data center or something else that will take that farmland out of not only farming, but out of my family's legacy. And it is something that, you know, we're focused on. I know the American Farm Bureau is focused on this to help farm families determine if the current enterprise, such as ours in the dairy industry, isn't the one that will take the farm into the next generation. Well, what are the options? What other types of agriculture or agritourism can a farm now look at that will be viable, that will keep that farm in that same family, or at least in that community?
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing too, because I think agritourism, I'm finding when I go visit a lot of FarmHERs and ranchers, they're implementing that on their properties because they have to supplement the cost. And it's totally understandable. And they're like, oh my gosh, you know, my great grandfather would be rolling over right now knowing like we're just giving horse tours on this property. But they're like, we have to make this work if we want to keep it in the family. And I'm like, you've got to do what you got to do. You got to make it work for you. And I think the weight that people carry, just knowing the pressures of, man, my family worked so hard to have this. I don't want to be the one to lose it. And then they're like, and then I don't want our kids. We want to make sure we set up our children and their children. It's just a lot, right? It's a lot that people have to think about and then work for and work towards. Both of you, again, I know, Rupa, you already talked about Perfect Sundays and the intentional connection and the grassroots you guys had. But you, Jeff, reinforcing community-based mental health approaches in the next generation. Is there anything, before we go, we have another video, is there anything both that you guys would like to even just discuss just around this topic? Again, we have another segment that we're going to keep talking about this, but I just think it hits home for both of you. You guys understand it.
No, I mean, I think the weight of legacy is so heavy for anyone, especially when it's connected to land. And so the hope is, at least with Perfect Sundays and seeing it on screen and seeing this family kind of try the different kind of supplemental avenues and the different conversations that come up, hopefully seeing out on screen that entertainment will be a vehicle for an emotional catharsis and more conversation. I mean, my husband and I always joke that, you know, we used to have cultural commonalities like, I don't know, Jaws in the 70s or Forrest Gump in the 90s. But now beyond politics and sports, it's hard to have these cultural commonalities. And our hope is with this series that farmers feel seen and understood and want to kind of bridge the divide within themselves, within their families, and the community. I mean, it breaks my heart when I go to a farm and I'm more invested in it than their neighbors invested in it, right? And they don't even know what's happening at the farm next door. So just kind of opening up the eyes, that's it, whether it's through dialogue or entertainment, just to, you know, be open to seeing things differently. Don't just drive past the farm. Stop and maybe ask a question.
Yeah, we go back to, like Jessica said earlier, you know, talk to your neighbors. Like, we need to communicate better. You talked about that too, Jeff. Land, you mentioned land. They're not making any more of it, right? So if we have it, we try to.
He always said that.
Yep, my dad says it too. They're not making any more land. But then that also adds a pressure of like, oh my gosh, I gotta try to hold on to this, keep it. Jeff, I don't want to make it too personal, but I want to bring it back to you. And having such a an accident that happened in your family like this, I mean, you felt that weight. You guys felt it, and you might not have been able to see it before. And so for anybody at home that is watching, I mean, what would you say? Like, we didn't see it, but like, here we are now.
Yeah, we certainly didn't see this coming because my nephew was the last person
Yeah.
Not only in my family, but the entire community. We would have expected this to happen to. But he was suffering in silence, which a lot of people do, especially a lot of farmers, because again, we have this cowboy up mentality that we're taught from the time we're young people to be independent and not talk about things that could make people uncomfortable. But out of this is coming, I believe, as much as I miss my nephew, a lot of healing for my family as we travel and tell our story. Because as Rupa said, storytelling is so incredibly important, because less than 2% of our population in the country live or are involved in farming, right? So the other 98% need to understand the unique challenges and obstacles and many times heartbreak that comes with farming. And that's what you and Sam have done with your films. And that's what we try to do in our work with Rural Minds, is we do a lot of storytelling, because the stories are out there and they're gems. And as tragic as many of them are, these are stories that need to be told, because it's going to help another family, potentially, who's facing something similar to what my family did.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is it doesn't need big, dramatic change, it needs intentional change.
Yeah.
Before we came on here, I know you mentioned something about we need to humanize this.
Yes.
Because it's a human thing.
Yeah.
And we all just need to be connected to that. Again, the conversation's going to continue. We have still more to discuss, but it's time for us to take a quick break. But we'll be right back, and you can see all how we can get more involved in supporting all of these moments. So stay with us. Welcome back to Protect Her, the weight we carry. We're back to close out our show with Jessica and Rupa so we can dig a little deeper, more than we already have, into supporting those who are struggling with mental health. A lot of people want help. They don't know how to ask for it. What does support actually look like? When do I actually need it? Am I just going through this today? Am I going to be going through this tomorrow? I mean, both of you, again, boots on the ground, you understand in different realms of this, different avenues. So I'd like both of you to answer this. What does support actually look like for someone struggling?
I get this question so much.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Because now we talked earlier about the fact that the stigma really is shifting. We're seeing a shift in the stigma. People are showing up for these conversations in ways now that they didn't show up before. But that means that more people want to help.
Yeah.
And knowing that we're involved at American Farm Bureau, that Farm State of Mind is helping, and we're a grassroots organization, so people are like, okay, how do I get involved? How do I help? And it's such a personal and deep conversation that people feel like, I want to make it better, but I don't know what to do. Okay, so I've learned a few things, and I think really the biggest thing I would say, if you are wanting to talk with somebody who might be struggling, do not be afraid to start the conversation. We actually have resources at farmstateofmind.org where you can, it tells you how to start a conversation. We even have a free training online as well to help you know how to start a conversation. So that's the very first thing, is don't be afraid to start the conversation. I also would say, don't be afraid to refer somebody to resources. You heard Jeff talking about resources. You heard me tell you about Together All. You saw the video with Steve. You heard about 988. You heard that in Together All, you can access free counseling services and consultation services that are provided by PASS. And I could go on and on. We have a national resource directory on our site as well. But a lot of times people are afraid to even just say, hey, did you know that there's this phone number you can call? Or did you know that you can access free counseling services? Because they think that the person they're talking to is going to be offended.
Yeah.
Please don't be afraid. It's better for them to know than to not know. So that's really a big piece, is fear can often keep us silent. And really our voice is our biggest power to be able to help somebody else. So I would also say we actually just released a checklist in May for Mental Health Month. And it's 6 very accessible, very easy things that really anyone can implement into their life. I implement them in my life. They were inspired by a dairy farmer. We've been talking about dairy a lot today. They were inspired by a dairy farmer in upstate South Carolina who went through a really, really hard time and implemented these 6 ways of weathering the storms of life. Yeah. And so that's another thing you can do. You can look at those 6 things and you can say to your friend or your neighbor or your family member, hey, have you unplugged recently? Why don't we go into town for dinner? You know? Or why don't you take a pause? Just take a little bit of time to get a breather today. And you can incorporate those 6 things into your conversations, into your encouragement for your friends and family. It's very easy to help people get over a hump with just very small strategies like that. So that's my biggest recommendation. Of course, if you really want to be a strong advocate, you can get on social media, you can talk about it. We have a lot of people in the Farm Bureau community that are doing that now. You can hear their story. You have people like Jeff who are starting nonprofits. There's so many different ways that people are mobilizing and are helping. In our organization, we're grassroots, so I tell people, start something.
Yeah.
Like, just decide what you care about, how you want to help, what you want to do. Go to your local Farm Bureau and rally the troops and start something. Make a difference in your community. And that's really what I think is needed in order to get these conversations, these connections happening, you know. Host a Perfect Sunday screening.
Yeah. Hey, we love
and
that.
have a bunch of conversations. We're talking to a ton of people right now about, hey, you should show Perfect Sundays and and have conversations in your community, at your churches, with your Farm Bureau around the storyline of Perfect Sundays and how it's going to be helpful to our communities.
I always say this too, if you even think that anybody, put them on your prayer list. Put them on somebody's prayer list, right?
Yes.
I mean, why not? I think too, though, it's hope and humanity that people are wanting to help, that people are like, where can we go? What's the solution? But aside from there always just being solutions, why is the tool of just listening so powerful, Rupa? I mean, you know that.
Well, I feel like listening is, it feels so rare now.
Yeah.
It feels like a real act of service if someone listens. I know for me, I feel like volunteering is the healthiest thing you can do for your heart, and I think listening is the healthiest thing you can do for someone else's heart. Because I think when you are actively listening, you're pretty much indirectly saying your voice matters, you're important, you're valuable. Just to add to Jessica's point from earlier, I will say there are a lot of people who've gotten used to struggling just a little bit every day. And they're, you know, things don't have to be dire for you to have a reaction to them, you know? And so I think listening without comparing is really valuable, and just knowing that everyone's story and everyone's farm is unique and everyone's life is unique. And then honestly, practice what you preach. If you want someone to listen to you, you should step up and listen to someone else. If you don't like when you're not getting a text message back, reply right away, you know, kind of practice what you preach. And I think one of the things I've learned in making Perfect Sundays in Silo is giving the opportunity to farmers, to other people who are struggling, to other people to support you is a real great thing to do. Is that sometimes the person who needs the support needs to feel like they could give something to you, needs to feel like they bring you joy. And so I think giving other people the opportunity to make you feel good makes them feel good.
Yeah, something I love to always talk about is giving people grace. I'm so grateful that my parents taught me that, because we're not always our best selves, right? And so if you can give people grace, they can also extend that, especially when you need it and when you're not your best self. Because let's be honest, we're not always on our A game, right?
Yes.
We're just not, and that's the reality of it. I know you both already mentioned organizations, lenders, co-ops, everything that is super helpful, companies. But let's talk about the responsibilities they have in securing mental health for people.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned in the earlier segment that even Farm Bureau was like, do we do this? Do we not? And then,
fear.
Yeah,
Somebody
exactly.
mentioned fear here, and that's the thing.
But when the farmers were saying this is important to us, it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And also our president, Zippy Duvall, is very open about sharing his own personal struggles. And I think that's been very inspirational. But frankly, and he will tell anyone, the first time that he broke down on camera, he thought he thought he was going to lose his job afterwards because he thought that he was going to be judged. And that's why I want to make this point based on what you said about giving grace. If you give somebody grace like that, that helps you not unintentionally judge them. I know that what our president, Zibby Duvall, was afraid of is judgment.
Yep.
And that's what people are afraid of. That's where stigma comes in. They're afraid that they're going to be judged and that they're going to look badly. So when you give grace and you speak to someone and listen to them and you show that regardless of what you're thinking, I'm not going to judge you. I think that that really does break things down. So I know you wanted to me to talk about the partner conversation, but frankly, I think that it segues into what organizations, co-ops, companies, what's their role in all of this? We've been asking that question for a while now because we were doing Farm State of Mind and really working through our State Farm Bureau pipeline, right, to be able to reach states and counties and members all across the country. And Farm State of Mind isn't only for Farm Bureau members. We've been doing this in partnership with National Farmers Union, with Farm Credit, with many others ever since the very beginning. But now we realized, okay, we're reaching people and this is working and we've got resources that people need. How do we work with partnering organizations, companies, affiliates who also want to help the same people so that we can expand our reach? And that is when we just recently we've been a part of alliances, but we've just recently started the Farm State of Mind Alliance. And this alliance is basically taking all of the ways that we were raising awareness, sharing resources, even anything from like toolkits for organizations. We were doing that for state farm bureaus. Now companies and co-ops and organizations can come alongside of American Farm Bureau and Farm State of Mind, and we can help them do it too. And that is the vision behind this, is to leverage our collective influence to impact change. So there are people that a co-op is going to interact with or know or reach that we're not interacting with. And so that means that's that many more households that we could reach with the right resources, with the right messages, with the stigma reducing opportunities, as well as no cost resources, right? And I'm just super excited about it. We've seen just such a meeting of the minds of folks that really care about this. I would say that Perfect Sundays and Rupa and Sam have been like one of those partners. You know, they're doing their series, which is completely different from our scope of work, but we're coming alongside and saying like, hey, we both care about this conversation, you know? So I think that there's something very powerful about joining forces for the greater good.
Yeah, there's a destination, right? And there's lots of roads that you can travel to get to that destination. And if we have cars on all those roads, helping people to get to that destination, that's all that matters.
And not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
In industry, we're not clinicians.
No.
We're not mental health experts. And so one organization or company doesn't want to start their very own thing and have to start from scratch. So by joining forces and having a unified effort, then we're able to reach more people and make sure that they're getting information and resources in ways that will actually move the needle and make a difference.
Well, it kind of goes back to the whole thing too. Like, we're stronger together. Isolation is isolating. It's lonely. Who wants to be lonely? Like Jeff said, he's like, we all feel it, you know, and so that's a hard thing. I mean, Rupa, what are any of your thoughts to just emphasizing any or everyday practices for, you know, mental wellness, mental well-being, I mean, in the households? Like, what would you encourage people? What would you tell them?
I mean, I'm such a big fan of just taking a walk and making a phone call. You know, moving the body does move the mind. Just get out of your element, out of your environment. And on a deeper level, you know, I had my daughter the same year my mom passed away. And I have to say, like, everyone goes through their own dark moments and everyone's on a different spectrum. And I know me reminding myself that I'm a child was very, very helpful. And so I think of the person who is struggling to go for the walk, make the phone call, if they can somehow remember that they're a child, deserving of love, guidance. I mean, I could cry, like, could ask for help. Like, if we think of ourselves as children still, we're more forgiving of each other, we have more grace, and we can ask for help, and that it's okay. And so it's like destigmatizing it, but also just making it like okay in everyday practice to say that we all need to help each other.
Yeah, I love obviously talking to children too, because they're very honest, brutally honest, right?
Yes.
But like, they're so innocent and they just mean it. And again, they're not tainted by anything that maybe we all grow and mature and become adults, and we're like a little tainted by things. And I think it goes back to what Jeff said of just humanizing things. We just need to remember we're all humans. We're all walking this earth for the first time. This is all our first journeys. It's hard. It's good.
And we can look
it's
out
happy.
for
It's
each
not
other.
always hard, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's super great, but in the hard moments, there are resources. There's people who want to help. I know before we close, I think there is a video that we'd like to show. And so if we can look at that now.
Make sure they're okay. Let them know that you're there for them. If you are down or depressed, I encourage you to ask for help. It's okay. We've been there before, and you're not alone. Let's end the stigma of mental health. We're all in this together.
So Jessica, you see that. You said we're all in this together. That's something we've been preaching right now. And I mean, again, we still have some more time left on show. What would you say to that? Because you guys, Farm Bureau, you guys were able to get out there and film with that. And it's not easy for ranchers or farmers to get on camera and even admit some like weakness. That's not weakness, but we've kind of categorized it in the U.S. as weakness.
Yeah, actually, there's a farmer in Arkansas who has shared very boldly his story. And one thing that he said that I've since quoted him over and over again as I've worked with Farm State of Mind, he said, you know, Jessica, farmers think that reaching out for help is a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
But it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. And hard things take strength. So he said, reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And that's something that I feel if we can get that in our mind, then more and more people will be willing to say, okay, I'm going to do the hard thing, but it's worth it, you know?
Yeah. Strength. We always talk about that, and it's like mental strength, physical strength, you name it. We can talk about the economy, we can talk about things getting people down, but we've been here before sometimes, right? And you know, you look at the way the world is going, and right, wrong, and different, you just want people to be able to lift themselves up or lift up their neighbors. I mean, again, you're putting out the series, you guys know Perfect Sundays, you've done Silo, and that is, you feel probably your guys' calling to help others. That's got to bring you some sense of pride or joy, right? Like,
yes, really. I mean, you know, early on in developing the script, we actually met with Ted Matthews, who's the head of rural psychology at the Department of Agriculture in Minnesota. And he said one of the first signs, you know, a farmer is retreating or going into isolation is that they don't show up at church. Yeah. And we really took that to heart. And so Perfect Sundays really weaves kind of the role of faith, farm, family, the community, how we can all come together, like you're talking about, to help one another. And it's critical. We all want it, so why don't we just kind of do it? Yeah. You know? I mean, we all say we want to connect, but then we prioritize looking down at our phone before we say hi to each other. And so hopefully the series will inspire people to think outside of their own homes a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Well, again, stop looking down, look up. I mean, we're all in this together. I want to thank you both for joining us tonight on RFD-TV's stage and just speaking about this, because it is a heavy topic, but it's a topic that needs to be discussed. So on behalf of myself, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us as well. Jessica, Rupa, thank you so much. And again, if you guys need help, feel free to reach out. I'm Kirbe Schnoor with RFD-TV. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.